Hi, my name is Forrest Rivers, and welcome to Mystic Soul Revival, the inner path to peace. For many years, I, like a lot of people, believed that if you want to change all of the injustices in the world, all you had to do was protest and demonstrate and organize into groups to speak out and inform others about various injustices. But then I had my spiritual awakening about 12 years ago. And since that time, my entire perspective on how you address the world's injustices has really shifted. I've come to believe that if you really want to change the world, protesting and demonstrating, while important and possibly impactful, is not the most significant way or effective way to make change. If you really want to make change, you have to first start within yourself. Think about it this way. All of the injustices we see in the world, for example, the maltreatment of workers, the bigotry we still see in many corners of the world, hunger, poverty, war, and aggression, all of these things are simply collective reflections of our inner states of awareness. In other words, everything we see on the external level, all of the world's suffering that we see, are simply mirror reflections of our own states of vibration. The collective is a mirror of the individual state, and the individual states of consciousness are a mirror of the collective states of consciousness. It's as simple as that, right? So if we want to make change in the world, we have to begin with ourselves first. That means that where we see aggression in the world, we need to cultivate greater peace within ourselves. Where we see a lack of respect for the natural world, we have to cultivate a greater respect for the natural world within ourselves. Where we see the lines of separation drawn on race, class, ethnicity, sex, that means that individually, many of us are still stuck in this dualistic way of seeing the world. You know, black and white, left and right, conservative and liberal, my country and your country. We have to get out of that, right? So I would argue that the most revolutionary act that we can engage in is not protesting, it's not through demonstrating, it's not through social justice activism. The most revolutionary act we can all engage in is to start finding inner peace within ourselves through practices like meditation and prayer, through intentionally communing with the natural world, through journaling, through engaging in honest self-reflection, shadow work, identifying those aspects of ourself that we see as inherent weaknesses that can be improved upon. That's how real change, I would argue, was made. There's an interesting idea put forth by Black Elk, who is a famous Lakota leader in the United States. And Black Elk observed that if you really want to improve your family, you have to first start with evolving and improving yourself. If you want to improve the functioning of your community, you have to get to heal your family. You have to have your family in order, which starts with getting yourself in order. If you want to have a better functioning, a higher functioning government, you start with having functioning communities, which derive from having functioning families, which in turn derive from functioning conscious individuals. His idea was that if you want to make change, you start with the individual and then you move up the ladder. Now, of course, this idea that higher consciousness begins with us first And then it moves into our families, our communities, and our societal structures. Of course, this all flies in the face of prevailing logic. In many of our schools, in our K through 12 education systems, and especially in our higher education, colleges and universities, there's a point of emphasis really on social justice activism, but little attention focuses on the notion of individuals finding inner peace within themselves first. So it's not surprising that we don't really see much of an emphasis on practices like meditation, as I mentioned earlier. We don't see an emphasis on the importance of communing with the natural world. We don't see much of an emphasis on adopting non-dual understandings, not seeing things in terms of black and white. It's not surprising that we don't see a lot of spiritual leaders or teachers invited to college classrooms to share their wisdom with impressionable students. Instead, we see the point of emphasis, as I mentioned earlier, on social justice activism. And again, I'm not saying that protest and demonstrations and calling out injustices doesn't have its place. It certainly does. And there's been significant improvements made in many areas of our life through protest. But if you really want to get at the roots of those dark elements in the world, what you have to do is begin with yourself. So another interesting story, one of my favorite spiritual teachers, the late Baba Ram Dass, he once spent 6 months in an ashram earlier on in his career in India with his guru, Neem Karoli Baba. And while he was spending a period in solitude, really working on his own inner being, in America, a lot of his friends were engaged in all of the social justice movements of the time, particularly the anti-war movement. And Ram Dass noted how while he was spending hours in solitude in this ashram, it began to occur to him that perhaps the real revolutionaries may have been those who were doing the inner work on themselves, as opposed to those who were engaged in protest and demonstrating. Now, again, he wasn't knocking those who were demonstrating. In fact, he noted that was their path, and it had great merit to it. But it led him to wonder, maybe those who were deciding to do the inner work on themselves are as much of revolutionaries, maybe even more, than those who were protesting in the streets. The whole point is, if we want to solve injustice, if we really want to create a world that is peaceful, we have to begin with our own inner work first. Once we've cultivated a greater faith, more inner peace, and we're able to live in the natural flow of oneness, well then, of course, we can bring that level of awareness, the heightened consciousness, into our protest, into our demonstrations, and it imbues it with that much more power. If you like what you heard today, you can click on the subscribe button below. So much peace to everybody, and I greatly appreciate you tuning in. Be well.